Hello.
Hey,
um, hey. So I thought I would just start by kind of saying the history, that we did this last year, and we all seem to have a great time. I know for me, it was a really great experience because as playwrights, when we do a panel or something like that, it's usually, I don't know, a little stressful and kind of like on the spot, and someone's moderating, but this was like a organic conversation that felt kind of like we were letting people look into friends having a conversation and the kind of questions we might want to ask each other about our process. Uh, how did you all feel about it?
Yeah, I agree. I think usually it's like these talkbacks after a reading or after a performance that's about the actual thing that you've just seen, and you're sitting there because all you saw was all the things that were wrong with your thing anyway. So like, the last thing you want to do is hear people telling you more stuff that's wrong. So yeah, it was fun too.
Yeah, and I'm genuinely curious about how you both are, and I like to find out some stuff about what's in your mind.
Yeah, and I feel like we don't often ask each other these kinds of questions, actually.
I agree.
As a writer, so do you want me to start off with a question, or?
Yeah.
Okay. So I ended up, we all decided we'd write 3, and I wrote more than that. But some of them questions I wanted to ask, and then I thought about demystifying the playwright process, and that there are questions more geared toward that might be more appropriate. But one of them is, what do you do with a new draft of a play, and how has that changed over the course of your career? Cori, do you want to start?
Okay. Well, I rarely will show somebody a work in progress. So that's the first thing. I think I usually finish a first draft before I'll show it to anyone. Although I will say that as time has gone along, I can sometimes be convinced to show something in progress, which I wouldn't do at all in the beginning. I'm getting over a cold, so there's some terrible postnasal activity happening, but anyway, yeah, so that's the first thing, is that I usually won't show someone something until it's finished, because I also usually write so like off the fly without really even knowing what I'm writing, without a plan. And so I think until I finished it, I don't know what it's about. I don't know where I'm going. I don't know what I want to say. And so that's when I kind of now know more or less the shape of what it is. And that's the point when I can start like opening myself up to figuring out actually what it is and what to do, and taking feedback and that sort of thing. So.
But I mean, is there, aside from the sort of like the post-show thing that you're talking about, where people are like peppering you with their notes, like their wishes for what would happen, is there anybody that you go to just with questions, or who you want to have ask you questions?
Oh, I do. There are some directors that I really trust, or people I've worked with, or some playwrights, and those are the people that I would show something to. But I have to say, I don't mind people asking questions, and even those really dumb questions sometimes that are asked, or those, horrible moments after a reading when people are just peppering. I've never minded it, because I always pay attention to questions, even when they're absolutely, and they're prescriptive or whatever, things that we don't want. I always will pay attention to it, because it does make me look at something. And I mean, sometimes it's not that I'm looking at it and like, oh, they think something's wrong or whatever. I'll just look at it and I'll like, yeah, I know what I'm saying, and that's what I want to say, or whatever it is. It kind of helps me to reinforce. And sometimes it does point out something that's wrong. And, you know, I'll question, why is somebody asking a question about this? And it just makes me look at it. So I've never minded questions. I like questions. I think, you know, prescriptive stuff I get a little bit more irritated by, but even that I will stop usually for a second and look at what it is and decide this makes sense or doesn't, or maybe there is something here, what they're saying makes no sense, but you know, there's something here that should be examined. So yeah.
And once you have the new draft, then what do you do with it?
I think, I mean, it depends, because at the moment, you know, I'm really lucky to be like in this residency, and if there's a place where I could show, I mean, I don't have a new draft of something at the moment, but when I have one, I mean, I have a place I could hand it in so that somebody can look at it and I can right away get some feedback or do some work on it. New Dramatist is another place that I've always been lucky that I can right away do something. So, you know, I'm very lucky to be connected to institutions and places where I know immediately I can get a reading if I need it or whatever. But I think I usually want to hear my play out loud. That's one of the first things that I want.
Yeah, I mean, it's so interesting to think like what even is, when I think back, let's say to the last play that I had produced, you know, it took 7 years and 2 full productions, you know what I mean, to get to the draft that it is now. So when was the first draft? I really don't know, like what was the first draft? Was it, you know, when there were like evocative notes in the beginning, or was it, you know, was it when there was a beginning, middle, and end? Was it after the first reading? You know what I mean? Was it after the first production?
Yeah, what is it?
What was that? I mean, it's, you know, now it's in a place where I'm like, every one of those words is roughly where I want it to be. But that took 7 years and so much iteration. It makes me just, you know, I guess at every juncture along the way, I was like trying to be finished. You know what I mean? Like I was trying to be at a place, but it's very hard to say. I mean, I think to answer the question a little bit, like for me, it's about over time, like lowering my incredible, ferocious sense of defendedness. Given that it's impossible to say like where you verge into draft and then you verge into final draft, you know what it's like, given that, and given the fact that thing that Cori, that you're describing of like going back and forth and like being asked questions and asking questions is the way that it evolves.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's like
the first draft, I think first draft to me is just, I've finished it. Like nothing has happened and I've just finished it. I've just finished the first like outpouring of whatever it is. That's the way I'm taking first draft, not that it's ever been heard out loud, because even after that first thing, I might already have gone back and changed it and stuff at some point before anyone hears it out loud or sees it. So yeah, I'm just going like the first, like I've written something and I have like a, you know, end of play on the page.
I love that there's so many variations just on what is in first draft.
Did you guys see the movie Tick, Tick, Boom by any chance?
Not yet.
I don't think so.
If you're a kind of person that likes musical theater, you will really enjoy the movie. I think it's pretty fantastic. I loved it a lot, but it does drive towards a climactic reading of a musical at music stands. And it was like, when I got to that point, it's like the whole movie has been leading up to this moment. And I was like, I think this is the only movie I've ever seen about a reading. Like it's about a workshop.
Because that was the culmination of the whole thing, was the reading.
Yeah, I mean, it's so moving because like the piece and the writer was so young, right? So like that was the thing that he was driving towards. Whereas now it's like I gotta get enough together so I can have the reading, so I can find out what the draft might be. You know what I mean?
Right.
It's so not a culminating experience.
Yeah.
I remember the days when it was like, I mean, a reading was as exciting as a production, or was like, I mean, I wasn't even dreaming of a production in those days. So just having a reading was like the production, the same excitement that you would get.
The reading went on the resume.
Oh, without a doubt, it was all readings. Yeah. Even your living room readings. I mean, and what about, okay, so shall I go next or who wants to go
Sure,
next?
go ahead. Yeah, go.
I wanted to ask both of you a question about the pandemic, which is, did you find, well, I mean, I'll share that first. I found it incredibly difficult, almost really impossible to write theater during, especially all of last year when we were just shut in and whatever, because I think there was this sense that was theater ever going to even happen again? I mean, there's still a little bit of it, but it feels like it's coming back sort of in a weird new way with masks and everything. But, it's sort of coming back. But I couldn't write for the theater or stage because I think I couldn't imagine if it was ever going to happen again. And so I wonder if either one of you felt that. And how that kind of impacted your urge to write or what you were writing or anything like that.
I mean, I thought that maybe it would make for writing, and I think maybe for some people it did, but I think for me, anxiety can really get in the way of writing, and which is something I've learned. Like when I'm struggling to write, usually I'm actually having some anxiety about writing or anxiety in some way. And the pandemic is still a lot of anxiety, especially we have little kids.
Yeah.
So it was, and in the beginning, it was like we were wiping down our groceries, like no one knew enough information. So yeah, I definitely felt hard to write anything, like not even just for theater. Yeah, what about you, Madeleine?
Oh yeah, totally. I mean, I felt like I felt like a door closed, like in my heart about the theater in a way. I mean, I think as a form of self-protection, I just was like, I can't picture being in that conversation. It's such a conversation, like anything that you mean for someone to say on a stage, you mean for someone to hear in an audience. And it's just not abstract. It's material, and it's in time, and it's in space, and all other versions of it are worthy and interesting. And I think the move into sort of digital streaming has been so awesome for so many people.
Mm-hmm.
And I love that I can see shows, at places that I wouldn't be able to get to. And I think it's really decisive for people who haven't been able to get to theaters, in the past. I mean, it just like opens up a whole new world. And yet that's not the same thing. That's not what I'm going to picture, as I go to write my next play. I'm not going to picture that form. So it's been really, I'm still sort of like trying to feel my way back into that dynamic and figure out like, well, what is it that I want to ask or think about in that kind of conversation?
On this question, did either of you do Zoom readings?
I did one, and it was kind of cool because I have friends who live internationally and in other places. So what was very cool was for them to be able to like attend a Zoom reading. That was really neat. So that I enjoyed that part of it. But I think the format I found very weird. I think there were some things that actually I had two, because I actually was commissioned to write a short play to be done on Zoom. So but I wrote it to be done on Zoom, like it's about a FaceTime call. I mean, I couldn't write something that wouldn't have been done that way and then try to, I just find that so weird that I can't quite, my brain doesn't work that way in a way. So, yeah. Did either one of you have Zoom readings or?
This is the reason that it's hard to write for Zoom. This moment is the reason why it's so hard. Yes, Basil.
I didn't. I specifically, I told my agents that I did not want to do it. But I don't know that that was the right decision, but it just at the time felt like I can't stand that, you know.
It's weird.
Yeah. I mean, it was fun. I did one, and it was of a play that I had done a while back. And it was basically, that was different because it was like revisiting something and getting together with some of the same people that had participated in the beginning, and basically just like hearing it again. And that, you know, like quickly, obviously people were getting creative with it and sort of like kind of punching out the sides of the form, like what can I do here? You know, what can I make happen? And I thought that was pretty delightful. And I wrote for a really amazing pop-up theater company called Theater in Quarantine, which you know, this guy Joshua was doing live plays in his closet in the East Village. He turned his closet in the East Village into a black box theater and figured out how to create liveness by making the performances happen at a very particular time and streaming them with really smart technology. And he started to work with lots of different amazing collaborators, whose names I'm not going to say out loud because I'll get them wrong. But that was cool because again, that was sort of like, it was different. There was more distance in it, but it was that same thing, like conversation in the moment.
That's cool.
And you know who did an amazing, I just want to shout it out. Liza Birkenmeyer wrote a really incredible play for this form called Please Welcome Our Guest. It was done, MTC did it, Trish Harnato directed it. I just thought the world of it. It was such a weird thing. It was a play, but it took the form of like a personality test. And it was like, Cori, like what you're saying, like picking FaceTime as the medium, you know what I mean? It sort of like steered into the skid. It was like, okay, let's like go inside this medium instead of doing a sort of knockoff version of the stage.
That's really cool.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, one of them was a revisited play that had been done. So that was just cool that was the one. It was cool that people who hadn't been able to see the production could now see a reading of the production. And it felt like it translated really well, actually, you know, far better than I expected it to. Whereas, you know, the other thing that was just done for that medium, that was also kind of, at least in context, it felt, you know, so, yeah.
I wonder why you wanted to ask the question.
Oh, about the pandemic thing. I was just curious because I mean, I found myself really having a hard time, especially writing for stage. I had a really hard time. My brain was like not able to see it. And I think I kind of like write so kind of like weirdly anyway, without planning and all that stuff, that I think, you know, it's like I'm seeing the thing almost happening as it's kind of happening in my brain. So if I couldn't see it happening or understanding how it could happen, I couldn't even write it, you know. And then I mean, I was very lucky. I now realize, because I was working on a project the whole year that was not at all theater related, which was, I mean, I was writing a nonfiction book, and so I finally finished that and all that, and that's going to come out next year. But so it was like such a whole new medium that had nothing to do with it. So it was like really a good thing to be able to focus on it. It still required work and focus. It was still writing, but it was just a completely different genre of writing. So that was like really good. That was a good thing.
I was going to ask you both if there's anything that you've tried lately that you hadn't tried before, let's say the last year and a half. That seems like an amazing segue into that. You wrote a nonfiction book.
I wrote a nonfiction book, but even what it is, it's a memoir of a woman. It's a true story. It's her memoir. And basically I wrote it, but it's her story. So, you know, she told me a lot of things, but I also had to do a lot of research. I mean, it's an amazing story. I mean, I should probably plug it anyway because it's coming out next year. This is a woman named Sarah Cruzan who was sort of groomed to be trafficked at age 11. It's a horrible story. I mean, at age 11, and then at 13, she was put on the street. And at 16, she shot and killed her pimp. And then she was tried as an adult and spent 19 years in prison. She got life without parole. She spent 19 years in prison until this sort of big international outcry helped to get her released. But there's a law that's about to be passed in her name to protect other kids from going through this experience that she went through, which is a really cool thing. So anyway, I had met her and become friends with her. It wasn't something I planned. I just met her and I was like, your story is really a compelling and interesting story, and I think you should write it. And she's like, oh, nobody would ever be interested in reading something about me. And I was like, I would be interested in it. So I was like, you need to write a book. So I then just happened to meet this literary agent, and I'm telling her about this woman, and she's like, oh, that's a wonderful story. I think it should be written. And she's like, but I think you should write it. And I'm like, I don't do that kind of writing at all. And she said, no, but you're her friend and you're a writer. You should try, you're a playwright. I mean, that means you can maybe get into understand and be able to express who she is. So I was like, she said, why don't you just do a sample chapter and we'll see. So that's what happened. I went and I spent some time with her and we talked about stuff, and then I just went away and wrote it and I sent it to her. And it was just, as I got to know her better, I was able to, because she'd be sometimes like, how do you know that? Like you just kind of get very fused with the person. So, and it was, I'd have to sometimes make up stuff, like the sun was shining and I was walking down the street and she's like, she would look at it and she's like, no, it was raining that day, or that kind of stuff then happened. So we were able to work that way, but I was also able to speak to people who had known her, her teachers, her friends, prison guards. I read psych reports. I read the trial, I was able to piece it all together that way. So it was a lot of work, and it was a big job, actually putting this whole thing together. But it's really, I'm really excited that it's finally going to come out. And I think it's a cool thing.
That's amazing.
What about you, Madeleine? Do you do new things?
Well, I don't want, now I feel like things I've been trying are dumb compared to that.
Oh, please.
I don't know. I mean, I've been working in various sort of episodic forms. I've been trying some TV writing, and I worked on an episodic, comedy podcast for Audible. And
I did that one time too.
You did?
But it was a dramatic one, but I did a episodic thing, but then in the end, it didn't even end up working, but I did do that. That was an interesting, different genre to work in too.
Yeah.
Right?
I find it incredible. I mean, mine is an adaptation of an existing material. So that's
okay. Yeah, no, we were putting something together.
Yeah. But it's very not the same as regular playwriting, and not just because you constantly have to have people say each other's names.
Yeah. And also I was like, you also say things before, like you find things out. It's like you telegraph information. And I was like, but that feels so like it's the opposite of what you would do in a play. Exactly. Like there is very little subtext or anything, like that. It's all like you did. And I was like, this feels so weird. So it was very strange getting into it and understanding that genre,
I mean, I think
That's
there's a
cool.
lot of fun to be had there. You know what I mean? And
yeah, it's cool.
An Audible is just like whatever. It's an empire. There's a lot of opportunity.
Definitely.
Audible is just one of the places.
Definitely. No, it's still like gives you that feeling of like being in a room and working with people and putting things together, putting episodes together. So it's still, I think, really cool. And I mean, I learned a lot. I learned a lot from that experience, and about dialogue. I think you learn a lot.
Totally. An objective. Yes.
Yeah.
That's cool. I haven't done a podcast kind of thing, but it seems interesting.
Maybe the three of us should do one.
I mean, not that ours wouldn't be awesome, but anybody can do it. We can definitely do it. Basil, have you been trying other things though?
TV stuff, and a lot of collaborations, which like collaborating on a pitch or a new concept, which I'm just enjoying so much. I'm enjoying collaboration so much. And I often think, how can this be a part of my playwriting life also, just because it feels so good to not be alone with something. And maybe that's pandemic, I don't know, but it just feels, once we get to like a workshop, then you're not alone anymore. But when you're working out the idea, I mean, and that's such a great exercise and is its own thing, but maybe just the age I'm at, how long I did that I'm just enjoying so much, just a free flowing ideas between other people and building on something. And it just feels very exciting.
Yeah, I mean, I have been having very much the same experience, and I've been also a little bit like sort of despairing about my own lack of skill at that. Like, so many years of working as a playwright, and as I said earlier, being ever so slightly insecure and defended, there's not, I don't know so well how to do it. And sometimes I find myself in this position when there's any moment of sort of stasis, or where it's not, we're not, as let's say a room full of writers, we're not moving forward to the next place, or if I feel responsible and I don't know how to make it work, like I freeze up, just like a little kid or something. Like I watch my colleagues in this writer's room who have like lots of improv experience, or who are just like super experienced as collaborative TV writers. And I just admire them so much, the way that that ease that you're talking about, that kind of like lift up an idea, lob it forward. Oh, it comes back to you in different form. Okay. And then back over the net in a different way. Like they just look so graceful around it. And I'm like, what about this? Like that's like my best version of like trying to participate.
I will say it's more enjoyable when it's like me and another person coming up with an idea, but in a writer's room with a bunch of people, it's hard. It's a whole new skill of being able to imagine on the fly too, and imagine in not silence, like a lot's going on, yet you're supposed to have your own imagining that I'm used to doing in a quiet place.
Yeah. But I was thinking about, because I was walking around being like, why is there not more of this in the theater? Playwrights are so siloed. We should be, whatever. And then I was like driving and listening to my very favorite Shakespeare scholar, like doing a lecture about, like, I think it was Measure for Measure. And she was like, well, there's all this controversy because it seems like there might be a lot of Middleton in this. It's Shakespeare's really only city comedy, but maybe this part is from Middleton, and here's how we know, whatever. And all of a sudden I was like, oh, obviously it's the writer's room. Like, it's not, there's a kind of, free flow authorship. There's a combinatory set of impulses, and people are working together, and there's not one definitive text. And like somebody else comes in and takes the play and they use it, and it gets transformed a little bit. It's collaborative. There is precedent for it in the Western theater. We just have the American theater, let's say in the mid 20th century on, has not fostered that.
Yeah, I think that I like that collaborative thing and working with people and brainstorming and coming up with stuff and everyone sort of working together. What I have the hardest time with is like the outline and pitch documents and those things. I just want to die, actually. I hate them, and I'm very, very, very bad at them. I don't know how to do them, actually. They fill me with high anxiety and make me really, and I just don't know how to do them. I freeze at the thought of writing a pitch document, truthfully, because it looks like a boring book report. Like if I talk about something, it's interesting, but when I have to try to write it out in an interesting way, it's just horrible. So yeah. I don't know what to do, truthfully. In fact, but you know what I'm always remembering? I don't know if you remember this, Madeleine. There was a thing you did at New Dramatists years ago where we had I don't know if it was like the bagel breakout or what, bourbon thing, whatever it was, but it was one of those things where we were talking about writing. What was it? It was writing like when you had to do an application.
Yeah, an artist statement workshop we did. Yeah.
I remember that. I couldn't go.
Were you there too?
I know, but I wanted to be there.
Oh, it was the best. it was the best, because what we all discovered, like we first went around and we were doing this thing and everyone was trying to sound really smart and whatever, and nobody understood what you were talking about. And then when like you'd say like, what do you mean? Then the person would just say it in plain English, and it was so interesting and clear. So I always remember that when I'm trying to do these things. I still haven't mastered it, but I remember that because I'm like, just be clear and simple. You don't have to sound smart or try to make a point or whatever it is. And
But
that's what we learned.
It's interesting, Cori, that you bring it up, because that workshop was based on, it came from a method that is in Andrew Simonet's amazing book, Making Your Life as an Artist, which you can download for free. He has an organization called Artists U, which you can look up, and he is just a true, like, and truly inspirational guru around sort of artists understanding their worth and thinking their way through their life in a reflective and grounded way. He's a choreographer and a writer, and he started to do this work of like helping other artists. And his thing is do it with someone else. Do your work with someone else. And so that's how we structured that thing at New Dramatists. We worked in a group. So somebody would do their version, and then someone else was writing down what they were saying, capturing what they were saying. And then other people were asking them questions, and they were refining their thoughts in the air while someone else was scribing. And that's like, so it's back to the collaboration thing in a way.
It's so awesome. It was so awesome. You just do it like you're telling, like trying to explain to somebody, because then they're like, well, what do you mean? And then you're like, oh, well, I just mean that you walk down the street and you buy a cup of coffee. But you were saying like, I need to imbibe the whatever, imbibe the liquid of the whatever beans, coffee beans that have been put through a process or whatever. And we just made it sound so complicated, and it was like the simplest thing you're trying to say. Or even sometimes just saying, I'm not really sure how this is going to work out, but I'm trying. And that would be so interesting to know that you didn't know how something was going to work out.
Right.
Yeah.
So it was really neat.
I mean, that's really, I mean, this also goes to another split between, let's say, film and television in general and theater in general, which is, we totally crass about it. One of those things is commerce, and one of them is charity. You know what I mean? Like in the theater, you can take all your time you want to, like, you can be very, I think, you can be front-footed about your vulnerability, but in your pitch document, if you're trying to sell your,
like, I don't really know how this is going to be.
Right, you're not supposed to be like, to be totally honest, this runs along an axis of curiosity that my entire life has turned around. Like, they're like, I can't talk that way.
We will not put our money into this thing that is so.
No, your vision quest is of no interest. Well, this sort of goes to the question that one of my questions that I was going to ask you both, which it can land in a lot of different ways, I think. But I was going to ask you, where does expertise live for you in your playwriting, and then by contrast, where does not knowing live in your playwriting? I feel like, Cori, you started to talk about this a little bit, just in terms of talking about writing without outline and stuff like that. But
yeah, I think that goes just by the way that I write usually. And this is connected to actually one of the questions I was going to ask. But anyway, I think I just start. I have to know how I'm starting, or I can't write it. If I don't know where I'm beginning, I don't know anything. I can't start. So I feel the beginning. I know the beginning. And I usually have felt some character or something and know something about that person, because I think I lock into a character first. And then I'll go there, but I don't know. And I think part of the not knowing, the more I don't know, usually in retrospect, the better it is. The more I know and try to know and infuse it with what I know, the worse it is, and the more work I have to do to undo stuff at the end, if that makes any sense. So the more I've stayed out of the way of the process and just let it happen and don't know what's happening. I mean, I'll sometimes start guessing like, oh, he's going to kill her or whatever. And then he doesn't kill her. And I'm like surprised, because I thought he was going to kill her, but he didn't. Those kinds of things happen. And I'm just I enjoy that process. And I think in the end, that translates to the play and the audience's response to the play, because it's like they lived through my experience of not really knowing. So I think that the more I don't know, the better it is. But expertise, I think the expertise comes in at the end of the first draft. You now kind of know, I think, what you're trying to say. So that's when you can now go back. I mean, this is the way I'm interpreting what you're asking. You can now go back and fine hone, because you now know, okay, this is now, I understand who this person is and what they're trying to do or what they're looking for, whatever. So now you can go back in the beginning and make sure that all the little moments are connected and things are, so I think that's the way I'm like, taking your question, and I don't know if it's the right answer, or, if it's answering it even.
It is. There's a right answer.
Yeah, well, this is true, but I don't know if that's what you were asking.
I mean, I feel very similarly to you, Cori. The less I know, the better. And the fun is in the curiosity and the discovery for me. And it is about, yeah, whenever I have something I think I'm trying to do, the more mess I make.
Exactly.
And the more I struggle to like get a good draft and have to like rack my brain to solve something that I put on it, and the play isn't even, I love this saying, which I know we've probably all heard, but that the play knows more than me.
Yes.
And that it shows me what it is and what it wants to be. And I have to like be open and, read between the lines and see what it's telling me. And I think expertise, definitely, I was thinking just like you said, Cori, in that after the first draft, when I'm shaping it, there's an expertise to that, but then also in the writing, like feeling secure enough and confident enough in the writing that I can just let it go.
Mhm.
And that I don't have to control it or worry about what I've written or go back over a million times. And I mean, not that I don't do that. Like because I don't know where I'm going, I start back at the beginning and I
Right.
Now
that you learn more and more. Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
That makes a lot of sense.
How about you?
Yeah.
What's your answer to that?
I feel like I had really lived by this idea that like mastery or expertise was for other parts of my life, places where like my day job, let's say, or like, I don't know, activism work or something like that, having a clue. And then playwriting was for a place to be, to not know, you know what I mean? To drive into something that I didn't know. And I guess that there's no way around that. I mean, I picked up again a play that the last time I heard it read was in, like maybe the fall of 2019. And I picked it up and I was like reading through it and I was like, well, obviously these 10 things need to change. Like obviously, patently on the surface, like just by flipping through, I can see. And then I'm like, I guess it'll just never end. I'll never know what the hell I'm doing while I'm doing it. I'll have to wait, until whatever time elapses. And then I'm what, just my brain is different or my life is different or I've learned more. I'm not sure, but it's sort of a little sad to think of like the play always being a little behind, you know what I mean? Or me being always a little behind the play. I don't know. Anyway, not quite being on top of it. But maybe that's just exactly what happens if you're using writing to be the kind of like prow of your curiosity, you know what I mean? Like at the front where things are most unclear. But then there's also the sort of obviously I'm preoccupied by TV because I'm trying to do a little bit of work there, and it's so foreign to me that I'm always like, what is this? What are these rules?
Right.
But there's so much expertise to be had in that form. And it seems a little bit like you could kind of max out, like there's an amount of things you could learn. And when you learn them, you'd know them, as opposed to, I mean, I'm sure this is like famous last words, may not be true at all. but it just feels like in playwriting, there's a kind of endlessly receding horizon. You could always
Yeah.
Yeah.
yourself.
Yes, that's true.
Part of that seems like the form and that there's so much playwriting can stretch so far and become so many things. There's so few rules about it.
Mhm.
The playwright Christina Anderson said this to me once, which I just thought was so brilliant, which was talking about teaching students, undergrads who are screenwriters and undergrads who are playwrights. She was like, the playwrights come up to you and they're like, I want to write about hunger. And then the screenwriters come up to you and they're like, my protagonist's name is Kenny. Like that's
Yep. Yeah, it's a very different way of thinking, but it's kind of cool to learn it, but it is something I'm still, and I've been finding that I find a screenplay is kind of an easier thing to do as a playwright than a TV series. I find that a little bit hard. I love the mini series format, limited series, where there's going to be a beginning and an end, because that feels like just a very long play. But there's still an arc, and there's still like a beginning and a middle and an end to the thing that you're telling. But when you just have to leave something open like that, that's something I'm not at all familiar with. So that's the thing that I'm trying to learn and understand how you do that. Because I think I'm used to resolving on some level, even if the resolution is not resolving, it's still like, okay, it hasn't been resolved, but that's the way it ends. Right. And so I think not having an end is weird for me. I'm trying to learn that.
When you talk about your writing, you also say things like, I see this happening, or there's some spatial relationship when you talk about it, like you're here and the writing is there and you're looking at it,
Yeah.
I wonder if that makes it easy for you. I'm like, do you see your plays in your head? Because I feel like I hear them in my ear. I don't see them in my head.
No, I don't see them at all.
You don't? Okay.
That was one of my questions I was going to ask, because I thought I was weird. I hear them. I completely hear them, which I think it was, who was it? Jose Rivera. I saw him doing a talk one time, because he's written in almost all the mediums. I think he was saying, you see a movie, you watch a movie with your eyes, and you hear a play with your ears. And then TV is a little bit of both, because it's something where somebody could change a channel really quickly. So you have to kind of hold their interest, and you have to give them information in a kind of a way that you wouldn't necessarily do in the other two ways. And I think now that everything is converging, now that everything is streaming, I don't know. It's kind of very, very, it's kind of an interesting thing, the different, but you're right. I think that's cool. It's a cool.
We do have a question.
Oh.
Is it hard to switch between being a lead artist as a playwright to television, where you maybe are writing another person's ideas or voice?
I haven't been a staff writer, so I can't say it. I mean, I can't speak to that. I've done screenplays, and I actually was very rude one time and told somebody, I don't want to write something that the world already exists, and I just have to do it, because it's too hard to figure it out. I'll do it at the very beginning, because then I understand and I'm part of the formation of the world. But if it's already in its 5th season, I can't, it's just, my brain is going to explode trying to figure out how we got there. So I don't know that I know how to do that. So anyway, they just kind of looked at me like, okay.
I'm in my first.
It was never say that again. Never go on a meeting.
It's so badass. It's so great. Say it. Tell them what you really think. I'm in my first room, which has only
kind of begun. So I don't know that I can totally answer because I'm not to the point where I've written a script, or I haven't written the script of my episode yet or anything like that. So I find that it feels like, although the showrunner has a vision for how it's going, everybody is co-creating within that vision. So there's a sense of ownership happening for me, that I feel. Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely, I feel like the adjustment for me has been, well, I guess what I would say is I was surprised at how little kind of miserliness or hoarding I felt about the work once it was like out, like once it's kind of coming out of this group effort anyway to begin with. And then like in the example of a show that I worked on that just recently aired, like when lines that I had written made their way out into reviews, you know what I mean? And of course are attributed to the star who said them, right? Nobody's like looking at who wrote the joke. That's not how Vulture writes about a television show, but right. I was like, oh, I just felt like so proud. And I was like, this is so interesting. Like if I wrote a play and someone else was like, it's incredibly funny, the lighting designer deserves a lot of credit, I would be like, excuse me, like and in this case, I didn't feel that way at all. I just felt like, and I was trying to describe it to someone and I was like, it feels like being a superhero with the power of invisibility. Like I don't feel diminished by that. I'm not getting any credit for it, but I feel like it's mine and that it's living and it's out there in the world. And it's doing something that's beyond my control and that wasn't mine alone to launch it into, So I think it might be good for me, to feel this way and not to hoard as much the way that I do, maybe more as a lead artist, like as a playwright.
Another question. Do you find that your work in other media affects your playwriting voice?
I don't think so. I think playwriting, the way I'll answer it is playwriting is familiar. It's home. It's like, I feel like I'm in charge and I'm in control because I know how to do this. Even though a play is always a mystery, you don't know. It's always like a new adventure play because each one is so different in the form and the style and everything is going to be completely different. So you don't know what's going to happen when you start it, and it's equally scary every time. But I know what I'm doing. I know how to do it. Whereas these other things I'm learning, I guess, as you were saying, Madeleine, it's like everyone else seems to know. And so you're like watching other people who understand and know. And I find myself watching a lot of TV because I'm trying to understand, what is it about it? What's the trick to it that makes you want to watch the next episode? What is that? And understanding those little tricks and the open-ended things. So I think because I'm still learning, they don't feel like they're connected. They're very different. I think each one is so different that I don't think one affects the other, but I think that you're always going to draw on your strengths as a playwright and as creating a character and creating dialogue. You're going to use that in all of these other mediums anyway. I think being a playwright helped me write that book about that woman, So I think they all inform each other in some kind of a way. I don't know I hope that answers the question for me.
Yeah, I think that I hope that the things that I'm learning from working episodically will give me some more skills without harming anything that I might do sort of more intuitively. Mm-hmm. Anybody would hope that, and it might be that's a fool's hope, but I don't. I think a little concision isn't always the worst thing for playwrights to learn. That's something you really practice in TV. a little bit of a sense of, pacing, a little bit of a sense of, you know, a sense that we know when we're in the beginning, middle, and end, you know what I mean? But
Yeah.
I don't know. I think maybe that question comes out of a particular fear that everybody shares, I think, who's a playwright, who's making that transition. And we probably could all think about a writer that we like, that we think maybe, their voice changed a little after they started to work in a different, in these other media. And so of course I think it's a risk, but maybe playwright, you'll be lucky and just like not get very much work. And then you won't have to worry that your playwriting will be harmed by your television writing.
I totally get that anxiety, that, and like, just like you said, Madeline, we all can think of maybe somebody that we feel like their voice changed. And I do think some things that I feel like were really useful as a playwright are not useful at all in episodic writing. And that something I struggle with is clarity in my plays. And when I'm writing an outline, when I'm writing a pitch document, clarity is my biggest issue. Like, I want to be like all, or I'm over explaining, or to where it becomes mush, because I see too much.
Right.
And so I think clarity, like you said, Madeline, could help my plays, and that it's actually not necessarily a good thing about them that there's a lack of clarity.
But, at the same time, there's this thing that, like one of my favorite playwrights, Stephen Adly Girgis, like when I think about some of those plays, like if you were to boil them down and try to make them into an outline, like just going incident from incident, well, there are none practically.
It would sound crazy. Yeah.
And yet they're gripping, and in fact, tremendous amounts of things change over the course of the plays, but they change inside character, or they change inside, interpersonal dynamic that doesn't translate to the kind of action that reads on screen. And I think Girgis is a great writer in all media, and seems clearly able to move fluidly back and forth. But like that thing, I'm just using him as an example, but like that thing where the action is, in a way, it is the language, like there's no
right.
It out. That is very hard to do in TV. And if you value it and then you want to protect it, you know what I mean? You never get to practice it in TV.
Okay. Yeah, I think you can't get stuck with your dialogue, because you have so much less. I mean, it's not people just sitting and talking, and we are painting the worlds with the dialogue in a play, whereas TV and film, you're showing stuff, so you just don't need to talk about it half the time. People don't talk about stuff, you just show it.
Right.
So we have about 5 minutes left.
I was going to ask you if you had seen any plays that recently, like post reopening, that you wanted to name or mention.
I'll talk about one I saw Trouble in Mind, which I'd never seen.
Incredible.
Wasn't it? I was like, I just couldn't believe it had been written 60 years ago. That's what I just kept. It felt like it was written this year. It was amazing.
Yeah.
So,
I saw that at Two River Theater in New Jersey back in, I guess it was 2012 or something like that. That play is extraordinary. I can't wait to see the Broadway.
Yeah, I had never seen it before. So, I mean, I'd read it, but it's when you see it, it's like, it's really a remarkable and amazing play. So that was cool.
Because of having little kids, I haven't gone to the theater.
Yeah. That's fine. I didn't mean to set you up. I just, was thinking like,
No,
I wouldn't.
Is there anything?
It's like one of the only times I went in, I was very nervous the whole time too. So I hear you.
Can I just say that I went to see Assassins, which I thought was fantastic. And as the lights were going down, there was a much older couple sitting next to me. And just as the house lights were going out, he said, well, all these people are young. If they get it, they won't die. And then the older woman said, Artie, if you want to leave, let's go right now. And then like, I was like, oh my gosh, the poor American theater, like as hard as it's ever been to get people to come out to plays. Literally this guy is like so mad at his wife. He's like, I'm going to die. I'm seeing this.
Yeah, you brought me to this play and now I'm going to die.
But he seemed to enjoy it in the end.
Well, that's good. At least if he dies, at least it'll be worth it. I mean, it's
right.
not even funny, right. But I mean, at least, at least.
Here's hoping he's well, and
Yes.
that he thought that the production was as good as I thought it was. Well, what are we going to do? See each other here same time next year?
Next year, I think we should make it an annual thing.
Sounds good. I love that we're ending on possible COVID death.
Should we try and turn it around? Should we
Yeah, something.
Let me ask about your kids. Do your kids do drama play? Like, are they natural hams? Do you see that they might become?
Well, now one of them is 3.5, and she is really into costumes and play, immersive.
Yeah, make believe.
Yeah, and at her age, it borders on like, are we playing or is it real? Like, she'll get emotional where it's like the lines are very blurred, which is really interesting.
That's amazing.
Yeah. All right. Well, it was so great to talk with all of you again.
Yeah, just great having these conversations with you two. I love it.
Thanks for spending time, and thanks to our interpreters too for their incredible.
Yes, thank you, Pro Bono ASL.
See you soon.
Yes.